And this is actually our last session for this week. This is so sad, but I hope you guys have had an awesome time. We sure have enjoyed you guys this past week. If you guys have had a great time, let's see in the chat. Let's see what you guys think. Hopefully, you guys have had a great experience. You learned some new things. You had some fun, hands-on, and engaging activities. And now here we are at our last session. So we're going to have a great close out this evening. And this is going to be, our topic is Meet Your Meets, and this is part 2. And our presenter for this evening is Yufei, and she's going to give us a great presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to her so we can have a great, great, great session. So get excited, guys. Here we go.
Thank you, Ryan, so much for the introduction. Okay, we're not ready.
No, I can't see her. Go ahead, you can keep going.
Okay.
Ah, nice drawing, Tristan. You can stop. Don't worry about it. I'll try to move.
So, hello everyone. My name is Yufei, and I'm actually a graduate student here at Purdue, and my major is actually meat science. Oh, nice art, Tristan. That's actually really cool. Thank you for sharing.
It's not working. Yeah.
So, I think most of you here were here for Miranda's session as well.
Oh, you changed to the. Gotcha. There we go.
Here we go. I'll open the. I will just. Okay.
Yeah, it does look pretty good.
I'm hoping that this presentation would have some amazing pictures for you guys. I know it's not really practical to really be cooking right now. Ideally, we would have been having a cooking demo right now, but sadly, we have to adapt, right? Those are really great artworks. So for this part, the first part we had learned about marbling and meat color. So those are really great visual aspects of fresh meat. So now we kind of know what we're looking for when we are picking meat in the grocery store. So now we're going to talk about meat cookery, which is how do we prepare that meat, and then how do we cook it, and then how can we, what methods can we use so we can have the best eating experience? So I want to focus on answering 3 major questions today. So first is, why do we tenderize meat? So first is, why do we tenderize meat? And once we figure out why, we'll talk about how do we do that? How can we tenderize meat? And then now that we got the meat prepared and it's on the grill cooking, we're going to talk about what temperatures should we cook the meat to. So starting off with, why do we tenderize meat? So sadly, not all meat cuts are created equal. And I know Miranda had touched on this a little bit. She said away from the head and the hoof are going to be more tender. So when an animal is growing, the animal fattens from head to tail and from top to bottom. So this way the cuts from the top or the front of the animal would have more fat than cuts are from the back and also lower portion of the animal. And what we call like the portion in the middle, we call them middle meats. So the middle meats are going to be more tender than the meats are on the side. So that kind of goes along with away from the head and away from the hoof, right? Because hoof going up and then head is going towards the middle. So it has to do with the location of the muscles. And there's locomotive muscles and supportive muscles. So when you think of locomotive, that's something, the muscle is being used a lot. So if you think of a bodybuilder, they have like really big arms, they have really big legs, right? They're exercising all the time. So those muscles are really strong. They're always getting exercise. And that's the same for an animal. So locomotive muscles are muscles that an animal uses to move around. And like the round, that's something kind of near the leg. So the animal has to graze and they have to stand up, lay down. They have to be able to walk around, right? So those muscles are used a lot and they're always getting exercise. So those muscles, actually have an example here. That's actually a round roast. And you can see how coarse that surface is. And you can see how much bigger those muscle bundles are, right? You can actually see them quite obviously with your eyes. And this white thing I want to know, I know we talked about marbling earlier, but sadly, that is not marbling. That's actually connective tissue. So when you think about like your ligaments, your tendons, those are connective tissues. So when the muscle is being exercised a lot, those muscles would also have more connective tissues in them. And variations in connective tissues will actually cause the meat to be tougher as well. And the second one here, actually, we have a rib roast. That comes from the rib portion of the cow, which is, we talk about the middle meat, right? It's in the middle. And you can see how much smoother this surface is over here comparing to this one over here. It's very coarse. You can see like the lines. And this one, you can see how much smoother that is. And also you can realize those little white specks. What are they called again? Don't be shy if you want to share your answers. If not, we can move on. It's okay. No pressure. So those little white specks are marbling, as we talked about earlier. So marbling can really help with your, thank you, Dr. Knopfler. Marbling will really help with your tenderness and your juiciness since it melts during cooking, if that rings a bell. So you can see this portion, right? Because the animal is not really exercising the muscle a whole lot. It's really just kind of there. It supports the animal. It's not constantly being exercised. So this would also cause a little bit more marbling, more fat in there, and that will greatly help with tenderness, juiciness, and flavor. So this is why some meats are naturally tougher than others. So sadly, not all meat cuts are created equal. So inherently, the middle meats are going to be more tender. So now we talked about why, because right, they vary in variation depending on the location. We're going to talk about how can we tenderize meat. So there are three main methods that we can use. First is mechanical tenderization. If you ever have a meat hammer at home, or like, I don't know, it's a great stress reliever, honestly, when you just like hammer it, you know. And second, we have salt water. It's actually brine enhancement, which we'll talk about later. So this is when you kind of, if you ever cook a turkey for Thanksgiving, actually by a show of hands, by vote, how many of you actually soak your turkey in some sort of salt water overnight for Thanksgiving? Nice. Oh, chicken. That's a great choice. Great method. Anybody else want to share? Awesome. So the third, speaking of chicken, ooh, are you getting chicken for dinner now? So the third one is actually functional ingredients. So this goes with brining as well, but we're going to touch on them when we get to that. So first, I have an activity for you guys. If Ryan could come help us, thank you. So I know it's listed that you would need paper. You can use either paper or paper towel and a pair of scissors, or if not, you can honestly use your fingers, that's fine too. And then also a bowl of water. So if you need to get those things, we can wait a couple of minutes so you have those things ready, and we can start in a minute.
You have a comment.
Oh.
Very interesting.
Oh, would you know about that?
Yeah. That is very interesting, actually. Oh, okay. So they won't see the steps then, right? On the...
No, they will.
They will.
Oh, okay.
They just need to change the camera.
Oh, gotcha.
Everybody see my hand?
You maybe can go to, your own
Yeah.
screen. Yeah.
Ah, there you go.
Okay, good.
Now click go up there to the three dots. And that's
Online.
Yeah, so they won't see your steps.
Oh, they won't see the steps then?
It's okay. Unless you need the steps.
Well, you can still share screen, right, Ryan?
yeah, you can still
Yeah,
share the screen.
yeah, you can still share the screen. And then share the slides. Yep.
I will go to that page. Actually, the before one, so they don't get to see the
Yep.
SpongeBob.
So everybody needs some water, a bowl of water, and a paper towel or paper, and then scissors, or you can just tear the paper. We're gonna do an activity together. And you want to leave chat open?
Yeah, well.
And if you are good to go,
If you guys can show like a thumbs up or some sort, or just type in chat that you're ready, then we can go. Ready.
Jay's ready. Huh, he folded 6 squares. Awesome. And then
Tristan, are you ready?
we'll just see how computer.
Dr. Knobloch ready?
Ready.
Yeah, if you guys could comment instead of
Yeah.
react, because we can't see all your reactions.
Yeah. Is that fine?
Yeah, that's fine. We're actually gonna make strips like this. So
Okay, I think most of the people are ready, so we're going to go ahead and start the activity. So first, we're going to tear this piece of paper into 3 strips. You can see Miranda is actually doing on camera if you want to follow as what we're doing. And we're going to use these 3 strips. We're going to pretend that those are actually a steak. We're going to pretend that those are meat.
I'm cutting the meat. I would have to be really strong if I could tear meat like this.
You can tear or cut with a pair of scissors. That doesn't really matter for this one. It's just to separate them into 3 strips.
Like that.
So we're going to take one of those strips. We're going to set that aside and just leave it as it is. We're not going to touch that. That one is going to be our not tenderized meat, just as it is. It's a control. So when you get sciencey, you always have a control group, so you can compare things to. Everybody ready?
Everybody have 3 strips?
Yep. Okay, sweet, great. And the second one, so for this, we set 1 strip aside, and the second strip, we're going to poke some holes on it, either with a pair of scissors or with your fingers, either way. Just basically, that one is going to be our mechanically tenderized steak. So what we're doing is that we're disrupting those muscle fibers in that steak. Yep, that's when you use the hammer for a great stress relief. Everybody good for the second one?
So we have holes. So we mechanically tenderize their meat.
Yep. Okay, we're going to move on to our third one. So the third one, we're going to dip it in water. But however, though, I want to make it very clear that water here is going to pretend to be our brine. It's in reality, it will be salt water. Meat is not like a sponge. So if you just throw it in plain water, it's not going to be like SpongeBob or a sponge that will magically soak up a bunch of water and then all of a sudden it becomes the juiciest thing in the planet, on planet Earth. That's not going to happen. So we're going to pretend that that's salt water. So we're going to dip the strip in there and then take it out. We could dry it a little bit, pet it dry or just squeeze it.
I'll normally rinse it off. With probably extra salt off.
Okay, everybody got the 3 strips? A control, a mechanically tenderized, and also a brine enhanced one. Remember that water, we're using that water, but yes, we can wait a bit, yes.
Yeah.
But in reality, it really would be salt water. If you saw what Miranda did, she petted the brine enhanced one dry with another paper towel. Just since we're waiting right now, so I figure we'll throw in another bit in here. So the reason a lot of times we will pet a steak dry before we cook it on the grill is that we're taking that moisture off of the surface, and that can actually help to give a really good crust. Yes, it's supposed to be wet. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, mine's really wet.
So think about that one as your brined or marinated meat, your brined meat. So since it wasn't a liquid, so when you take it out, it will have some liquid on top of that as well. Are we good? Good to move on?
You don't
have to dry it. Okay, great. So now we're going to start with the control. We're going to roll them up lengthwise, like how you would roll a map, like what Miranda is doing. And we're going to try to pull it apart like that. That would kind of mimic our chewing. So was it hard to chew through? Was it hard to pull? Harder to pull, that means it's a little tougher. So once we do that to the control one, we're going to repeat the same step for our mechanically tenderized strip.
The one with the holes.
Exactly, so the one with the holes in them.
That one's a little easier.
I'm glad. So remember on each one, when you pull them apart, was it hard, harder, easier, easy to pull apart? So once we have the mechanically tenderized strip pulled apart, we're going to do the brine enhanced one. Now we're going to pull that one apart. Is it tender?
It's tender.
So if anyone that participated, everything. Yes, because those are steaks. You want to chew them, right? You want to eat them. So we're going to chew through everything. So yes, we're going to rip through everything.
Chew.
True, yes. Don't actually eat paper. That is bad. So yeah. So once you're all done with it, if you'd like to share your experience, which one was the hardest one to pull apart and which ones are easier? If you're too shy, we can have Miranda share her experience.
Dr. Knobloch, how was your experience?
Water one's very easy to pull through.
Oh, he didn't do it. The water strip was very easy to pull apart. Okay.
Awesome. So the brine actually
What
weakened.
you said.
The hardest one was the.
Oh yeah. So the first one, the one that had no tenderization method. Nice. Was the one that we poked holes in or hammered easier than the first one?
So what we should see is that the first one is completely intact. We didn't do any kinds of tenderizing methods or apply anything to it. So that one is going to supposedly be the hardest one to pull apart, which will when you're actually eating it, it will be the hardest one to chew through. So that would actually be tougher. So for the mechanical one, because you disrupted those muscle fibers, they're now in smaller chunks, and that would actually be easier to chew through. And for the third one, the brine actually weakens those muscle proteins a little bit. So now they're not holding on to things as tight. So that's also will be easier to chew through. So in this case, it will be easier to pull apart. So I have some pictures to show you in terms of different methods. So for thank you, Ryan. So for the mechanical tenderizing, so you can see we talked about the meat hammer a lot. And in the industry, there could also be
Waffle meat.
waffle meat. That's actually very
Clever.
clever, yeah. That's a vivid description. It's yeah.
Thanks for being patient with us changing
Yeah.
technology. You guys are awesome.
Okay, so now for the one on the right, that's actually like injection. So it's the same theory because those needles are coming down. It's needle meat. So those actually is the same idea that they disrupt those muscle fibers. And then we have brine enhancement. So if some of you had said that you will brine like your poultry, your turkey, your chicken, you leave it in the brine overnight, and the science behind it is diffusion. So diffusion is when something of a higher concentration that they will move to the lower concentration, and then eventually they will reach equilibrium. So what this is happening is that, yes, we'll miss you, Tristan. Thank you for coming, even if you have to leave earlier. So for your brine, since it's a salt water solution, right? So the salt concentration in the brine will be higher than the salt concentration in the meat. So because of diffusion, those like salt water will go into the meat a little bit. So that can actually potentially bring in some liquid more into it. One thing to note though, very important, it has to be salt water. So when you just soak that piece of meat in water, it's not going to magically be like a sponge and be super juicy. That's something we really have to remember. And thirdly is functional ingredients. So I know I talked about salt, and that is the first ingredient I want to talk to you about. For functional ingredient, salt, it is very, very important because think about those muscle proteins. They're holding on to each other really tight. They work really hard to keep the animal standing up, laying down, walking around. So they're always working. So salt is like a deep tissue massage for those proteins. So when you rub salt, you apply salt, and those proteins will relax a bit. So once they're relaxed, instead of really tightly holding onto each other, they can actually grab onto some water. So this is when that brine, which is saltwater enhancement too, like how that because of diffusion, obviously the water would flow in. Because of the salt, those proteins are a little bit more relaxed, so they can hold on to the water that was that got into the meat because of diffusion. And if it's just plain water, even if it was in the meat, it will be cooked out at the end, or it might just come out when you like take it out of the brine. And when we think of salt, what else do we always think of that to go with it? Salt and pepper. So pepper can give the product a little more depth. So instead of just something really salty, the pepper would, great, pepper. So the pepper can help with your overall flavoring profile as well. And seasonings really work to give a product its identity. So we have our savory twins, which is garlic powder and onion powder. So those four things together, I think you really can't go wrong with it. I mean, that's like your, wow, that thing smells really good starter pack. Salt, pepper, garlic, and onion powders. So these are dry ingredients. We're going to talk about marinade, which is liquid. So because we talked about how salt can help the meat proteins to bind to water a little bit better. So when you have flavors as well, so that could help because of the salt, they might be able to hold on to that flavor a little bit more as well. So marinade obviously includes those functional ingredients. And not only for flavoring, marinade can actually help to tenderize your meat. So we're going to talk about some different kinds of marinades from the least to most tenderizing kinds. So these are three kinds of marinade from the least to most tenderizing. So first we have dairy-based, and then we have acid-based, and then we have tropical-based. So for dairy-based, it's like your yogurt, buttermilk, cream. The dairy-based marinade doesn't really have a whole lot of tenderizing effect. It's really for your flavor. So that way you can have something really creamy, like at the end. For instance, it's a really good choice for poultry, or honestly, for anything that will end up creamy. And one good thing about it though is that because it doesn't have a ton of tenderizing effect, you can leave the product in there for much longer. So you can leave it in there for 24 to 48 hours. And our second one is acid-based. So acid-based marinade is your like vinegar, lime, and lemon. So this one has a little bit more tenderizing. How about pineapples? Dylan, you're getting ahead of me. And we'll find out. So for acid-based, it has a little bit more tenderizing effect than the dairy-based. So it's kind of like you remember how Miranda talked about the choice grade is the middleman. So this acid-based is kind of like the middleman as well. It has some tenderizing effect, but it doesn't have a huge ton of tenderizing effect. So you can leave the product in there for like 12 to 24 hours. What does acid mean? So acid is like when you have something, it's sour. Like your vinegar, it's got a sourness to it. So for acid-based, if you really like a citrusy, which is that little sour citrusy kick to it, this is a great kind of marinade to use. And you can honestly leave it overnight, or you can put your steak or your chops or whatever meat you're going to cook in there before you leave for work or for school in the morning. And by the time you come back in the afternoon, it'll be ready and you can just throw it on the grill. So thirdly, which is the most tenderizing effect, we have tropical-based. And this is where the pineapple comes in. So tropical based means that it has a tropical fruit in this marinade. And how it works is because these tropical fruits has a natural enzyme in there that will actually break down those meat proteins. So if any of you really like pineapples, and then you had a bunch of pineapple all at once, and then you feel like the inside of your mouth to be really tender, that's actually because the enzyme in the pineapple actually broke down some of those proteins on the inside of your mouth. And that's the same of when it works in meat. However, though, here's a catch. It's great at tenderizing things, but you don't want to leave the product in this kind of marinade for too long. So normally we recommend 4 to 6 hours maximum. because if the protein gets broken down too much, then it can't really grab onto water anymore because it's so broken down. And also the product could actually be mushy somehow. And here's a safety bit for you guys. Once you use this marinade with your raw meat, and after the meat is cooked, you can't just pour this marinade onto your cooked meat and use it as a sauce. You cannot do that, cannot. So that's because once this raw meat has touched this marinade, you have to treat this marinade as raw meat. And if you pour this onto your cooked meat, I know some of you may be here for previous sessions that talked about contaminations in food. So that will be contamination. So you basically just uncooked your cooked steak. So normally if you do want to use that marinade, the rule of thumb is that you have to cook it for about 10 minutes in a rolling boil, and then you can use it as a topping. So now we have talked about why some meats are tougher and some are more tender and different kinds of marinade. Will you be the chef? And just before we start, I want to remind you that animals fattened from front to rear and top to bottom. So now I have a restaurant and I have some different cuts, and I would like your help of picking what kind of marinade I should use. So first one, we have I have round steaks. What kind of marinade should we use?
So will this be tougher because it's a locomotive muscle? Like the cow walks a lot, so it'll be tougher, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what kind of marinade should we use? I know we got tropical, pineapple. That's great. And you can see here, like we talked about earlier, that marbling. This one doesn't really have any kind of marbling. That's connective tissue, and there's really no marbling to help it out.
So it's not tender.
Right. So inherently is not tender. And we remember that locomotive muscles are tougher than supportive muscles than those middle meats. And so I know some people had gotten it right. There. So tropical base is really great for this one. And now we have a ribeye steak. What kind of marinade should we use for this one? And we can see here those beautiful marblings on there. Anybody want to take a shot? Flavor, yeah. So when it comes to middle meats, because they're inherently more tender, so you don't necessarily have to take a lot of like effort into trying to tenderize it more. So when it comes to middle meat, since they are inherently more tender, they have that marbling and everything. You can really kind of work on whichever flavor profile you like more. So for this one, you can use either dairy or acid-based. It depends if you want a creamier, you want a citrusy. It kind of really depends on what flavor you're looking for. And now we got the meat on the grill. How do we know what temperatures to cook the meat to? And this is what the minimum safety cooking temperature being recommended by the government. So I actually have some Play-Dohs. If Ryan can come help us real quick. So what we're going to show here, if you know that whole muscle steaks has a lower internal minimum temperature than ground products, we're going to talk about why is that. Are we good at the choice?
You need the temperature.
Yeah, can you do that?
Yeah.
was really loud.
Like next one.
This one?
Yeah.
Sorry. There we go. So now y'all can see the
Okay, everybody can see the Play-Doh. Okay. So we have two different kinds of Play-Doh. Two different color. One is blue or turquoise, and the other one is like a pink purplish. So we're going to say that this purple is meat, and then this is all like the raw meat, like the bugs, right? The bad stuff on it. So this is a whole muscle product. So when we break it open, you can see the blue is only on the outside. So before this muscle has been cut open, the inside of the muscle is actually sterile. So this is why we can cook beef, pork, veal, any whole muscle, cuts or chops, roast to a lower internal temperature than ground products. So here I have a well-mixed one. You see, everything is mixed together. I mean, once you open it, you can see the blue and the purple are very well mixed together. So this is like the bugs are obviously mixed in with your meats. So this is why we have to cook ground products to a higher internal temperature to ensure the safety. And now we have this one that is going to be mechanically tenderized meat. So you can see here I put the blue on the top, and then obviously the bottom is the meat. We're just going to poke it.
And put them that way.
Okay. So now we have poked a hole in it. And once you break it open, you can see on those areas, the blue had actually gone into the purple. If you can see that over there. It's not super obvious, but you can see those small particles of blue had gone inside to the meat. So those mechanically enhanced products are no longer sterile on the inside. So this is why we have to treat those products like ground products. We have to cook them to the higher internal temperature. So thank you. That's all for this one.
So the blue goes away when you cook it.
Yes.
And you had a question in the chat.
Oh, I didn't.
Then
I'm trying to
change
write it
back to
Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Feedback.
You might have to reshare.
Remove spotlight. Can I turn?
Yeah.
So you need to change your video too.
Oh,
I did. I kind of, yeah.
I have to hit the arrow.
Let me.
Yeah. What? No, this other one. Wait, what did I do?
So your question was, how does this chart count for medium rare, rare?
Oh,
It doesn't have it.
no. So these are the, that's a great question, actually. These are the minimum temperature. So for a whole muscle, the minimum you should cook it to is 145. So that is going to be, actually, it shows right here. So that's going to be like your rare, really, and then about like your 150. I'm not, to be completely honest, I am not like 100% sure on exactly what the temperature and the grade cut is at. But generally, so 165 is your well done, and then your 145 is on the rare side, and then 150 it's somewhere in the middle, kind of like your medium rare. So these are actually 5 whole muscle cuts, whole muscle steaks, and you can see they obviously look different. And number 1 is very pink, and number 5 is kind of more dry and brown. So when you hear like color and firmness to tell whether or not a steak is done, that's actually their lives. Don't listen.
That was the rate and pay.
Okay, can you hear now? Okay, cool. I don't know which part that it lost, but so for thermometers, basically, you can see the digital thermometers has a thinner probe, right? Just a quick recap. Then the one with the dial thermometer. So the thinner the probe, it would be easier to insert into the meat to take that measurement. So it will actually have a more accurate reading since it's easier to insert. And the dial thermometer, although it has a thicker probe, but it is still better than no thermometers. So if you only have a dial thermometer, still use it. And now we have the tool. So how do we take temperature? So first of all, we're going to remove that meat from the cooking element. And also just here to know, if that pair of tongs or spatula, whatever you're using, had touched raw meat, you need to either use a new pair or clean it. Because then again, it comes back to contamination, right? If you have touched the raw meat with it, you have to treat it as raw meat. So you wouldn't touch everything. If your hands had touched raw meat, you wouldn't go around and just touch everything else without washing your hands, right? Because that's dirty. It's the same thing when it comes to utensils. People tend to forget because they can't physically feel that sliminess on their hands. So that's just one thing to really remember. Make sure you have either separate sets or clean in between you handle raw and cooked meat. So you would pick this meat up, like in this case, a steak, from the cooking element, and then you would insert the probe from the side of the thickest part of the meat. So the thickest part of this is the coldest center of your meat. So if that center is cooked, then you know your meat is safe. So that's something.
Okay, can you try now?
Okay, I did.
Try now.
Thank you. Can you guys hear now?
Yes, that's better.
Okay, great. So that's the proper way to take meat temperature. And that way you're not left guessing, is my meat done? Is it ready to eat? So that way you can really get the safe product that also tastes good. So I know lastly, thanks for bearing with us for the technical difficulties. So lastly, we have a Kahoot. And it's the same website as the earlier one. Oh, no. If you would like to go to Kahoot.it, and then we're going to get that set up. Yeah, I will have that. You can use my phone. Here. Yeah. Right there. No. Yeah, I will. Right. Can everybody see the pen on it? Ooh, horse lover. Jay. Ooh, who is the horse lover? I wonder. Every meat lover. Me. Could be I am hungry. The pickle. I'm gonna. Are we ready? Ready to start? Alrighty, we're going to start. All right, we're gonna start. Meet expert. Are you? Let's find out. Ooh, everybody got it right. Nice.
Goat.
Goat. All right. Come on. Color is a lie when it comes to meat. Exactly. Ooh, Taylor's turn. Tropical based. Oh, changed again.
I'm off board now.
Nice. Everybody got this one right. Yes. Salt is your meat's best friend.
So everybody's gonna cook with salt now, right?
Last one. Double points. Diffusion. Yes. Okay. Who wins? Let's find out. Who's the expert? Oh, J number 3. I am hungry. Ooh. Drum roll, please. The pickle guy. Oh, runners up, goat and horse lover. See, you're on the board. That is awesome. See the chat. Where's the chat? Okay. Awesome. So that concludes the second part. I know it went a little bit longer, and we had some technical difficulties. So thank you everybody for staying with us through that. And you guys are free to go. Oh yeah, sorry, the link. And if you have any questions.